I'd like to welcome everybody to our Facebook Live feature of Patrick's Fearless Winter Forecast. And hey, before I get started, if you do have comments or questions, go ahead and let us know, and I'll try to answer a few of these as we go on and go through this. But I wanted to go ahead and kind of get a little bit deeper from what I was talking about at 6 and 7 o'clock. And first of all, we're going to take a look at our normals. This is what we're expecting as we head into the next 3 months. And December, obviously, is when you start to get a little bit cooler, and there you see some of our record our typical temperatures. Normally we should be around 52 for a high. Normal low should be around freezing. Here's our precipitation, and obviously if you live around here and experience it, we're over 20 inches below normal. So this is a key, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be close to this number. Notice January is our typical coldest month. High temperature only near 49, overnight lows well below freezing. There you see the rainfall or precipitation, and that's the wettest month of these 3 winter months. February, almost 5 inches, and notice temperatures gradually warm up, especially as you get into the second half of the month. There's the snowfall, and normally around here we get a little bit over 3 inches of snow. Last year, we didn't get anything at all. First of all, I wanted to talk about what I think this weather pattern, kind of in a general nutshell, will shape up as we're going to see basically the jet stream a little bit different than what we had last year. Last year we had a strong El Nino, and a strong El Nino has a lot of warming, a lot of moisture, especially off into the southern Pacific, especially just to the south and southeast of the Hawaiian Islands, and that's where we get our typical really warm waters that give us that El Nino, and that typically gives us a wetter type winter. And we did have a wetter winter, but this pattern is going to be a little bit different. The El Nino has relaxed. Now we're into what we call a really weak La Nina, or almost in a neutral type cycle. So we're going to be above normal when it comes to winter precipitation to the north and east, and down to the south it could be very dry along the Gulf Coast and really dry as you get closer to the desert southwest into parts of California. Notice around here, Chattanooga, we're going to be kind of right on the edge of normal and just slightly below normal when it comes to precipitation, but that will be a lot better from what we have seen the last, let's say, 2 to 3 months. In fact, the last 6 or 8 months have been very, very dry around here. So that will be something that we're looking at, and hopefully that will start to take place as we head into the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we try to get out of this drought a little bit as we head into the winter months. Next map I wanted to show you is our temperature forecast, and sometimes these kind of go together. When you're wetter, you're usually a little bit colder in the summer or winter, and when you're drier, you're usually a bit warmer, and this same type of pattern will coincide. Notice as you head into the Great Plains and back into the north and east, temperatures are going to be much colder. Could be a real tough winter for the Great Lakes on over through the northeast, and they'll see a lot of snow out of this. For us, right around normal when it comes to temperature-wise, we're going to see some of this cold air trying to drift onto the south, but as you head down into the deep south from Florida through Louisiana, Houston, and back into the southwest, temperatures are going to be well above normal as they're going to be seeing some warm weather for this winter. Closer to us, notice from Atlanta, just slightly above normal, but from Memphis on over through Charlotte and Chattanooga and Nashville and back over into Bristol and Knoxville, temperatures are going to be close to normal, kind of on average. So here's what we're looking for. When you take those two maps, you're looking for a weak La Nina developing. We talked about that. One thing that's key when you look at winter weather is that when you look at Alaska, if Alaska is warm, then the eastern part of the United States is usually quite cold. And it works the other way too. When Alaska is really cold and they have that bitter cold weather, it's usually pretty warm here. So it's almost like the old physics. For every equal and opposite reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And that's something that we're going to be watching too. Alaska could be a little bit warmer and a little bit wetter, so we'll watch for that. Colder eastern U.S. pattern appears to be more likely, and a possible blocking pattern. You may ask, well, what is a blocking pattern? That means when weather patterns just do not move from west to east like they normally do. We've had a blocking pattern a lot this fall and earlier this summer where you had a dominant weather feature, high pressure, right on top of us. And when you have high pressure right on top of us, it usually stays dry, usually stays hot. We had a very hot summer, and you can have something similar to that kind of in an opposite type way as you head into this winter. So that's something we're going to be watching pretty carefully. Here's our second little guidelines on what to look for. A northwest pattern track, which is kind of La Nina type flow. Snowpack to the north, if that really starts to establish themselves, especially from, let's say, north of the Mason-Dixon line through the Great Plains and Northeast and even Great Lake states, that will allow colder air to get farther south and less modification. Also, 2 or 3 Arctic invasions, I'm feeling pretty confident of that, especially during the month of January, and a big ski season. So if you're a skier or if you like heading to the slopes, especially around the Appalachians from West Virginia south through North Carolina and even into the Smokies, it will be a much better season than last year. Temperature outlook, once again, near normal, more like the winters that we had earlier in the decade. 13, 14, maybe 14, 15, with a chilly December. We're going to see some colder air head our way over the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then periods of cold January and February. And precipitation outlook, we're going to be near normal. We're not going to have a wet winter, but we will see some drought relief. So it's not going to be too wet with that northwest flow, but finally some drought relief. Remember I showed you those normals? And typically during a winter, you usually get about 12, maybe 12.5 inches of precipitation. If we can be near that, that will definitely be a big help compared to what we've had the last 3 or 4 months. All right, finally, here's what to expect. And this is kind of an approximation. Around here in the Tennessee Valley, when you include the mountains, you have about 5 or 6 different climates. So here's what we're expecting: a couple of snows, maybe an inch or greater, and obviously in the valleys, you're going to be more likely to see the snow toward Cleveland, Athens, on over through Murphy, back into Polk County, and those areas are have a little greater risk of seeing bigger snows than what we do in Chattanooga. Chattanooga has a hard time with laying snows. Everybody else has a pretty good shot, but Chattanooga, because we're in this concrete jungle, it's harder to get those laying snows. Twice in the mountains, usually because that temperature difference, you're more likely to get twice as much snow in the mountains and twice as many events. So that's something we'll look for as well. And finally, ice events. We usually get a couple of them each year. They're minor, but I think we may have a chance for a major storm in the mountains, but that's something we'll keep our eyes on. If that northwest flow continues through a good bit of winter, you're going to get a cold air kind of compacting us, and that's when you have the greatest risk of seeing those ice storms. So kind of in a nutshell, a bit different than last year because we were wetter and warmer. I think we may see near average precipitation, but I think our winter will be more similar than what we had last year, and it's going to be more typical of what we had 2 or 3 winters ago. So kind of in a nutshell, kind of in a winter weather outlook, and we'll see how things work out during the next 3 months. I think we may have a question or two. Do we have a question?
What is the chances of like a big snow like we did 2 years ago?
Okay, good question. Chances of a real big type snow. This is not the favorable pattern. That doesn't say it can't happen, but in order to get that real big snow, you have to have the Gulf really open up, and you have that moisture coming in from Birmingham and Tuscaloosa and Huntsville. That's where you get your major snows, your 6 to 12-inch snows. It's not out of the question. It's just not as likely this year. We're kind of in more of a 2 to 4-inch type of a snow pattern coming more out of the northwest or out of the west. So that's something we'll keep our eyes on. But, you know, this is a guide, and over a 90 to 95 day period, you could have something like that come out of the Gulf. It's just probably not as likely as what we normally have. What else do we have?
A lot of people are asking about further in Georgia. What your forecast that you did here, does that pertain?
It does. You saw the maps, and down to Atlanta, you're going to be getting a little bit drier and a little bit warmer. But for most of us here in our viewing and listening area, we're going to have typically not too much different of a climate or an expectation as what we're going to be expecting in southeast Tennessee. We're basically forecasting about 100 square miles, so I don't think it's going to be that much different. Obviously, you'll be just slightly warmer and maybe a little bit drier, but that's something we'll keep our eyes on too. And it all depends on the storm track. If the storm track is down to the south, you may be more likely to get the big snow. If it's a little farther to the north, you may be a little likely to get the rain, and the snow will be in southeast Tennessee. But you only find that out as you forecast each particular storm, and we'll kind of get into winter and tackle one of these one by one as we move along.
Aaron Smith on Facebook is asking about the polar vortex.
Okay. Aaron, you have the polar vortex that sometimes comes down in chunks, and we had that 2 or 3 years ago, and you have the possibility of that coming down again. Whether it goes and dries this far to the south, you'll have to, I guess, figure a couple of things. How late in the winter you have this. If it happens early in the winter, chances are it may not dig as far south. But if we have a proper snow cover, which I'm expecting a pretty good snow cover, especially from the plains south through parts of Kentucky and West Virginia, if the timing is right and that polar vortex is wanting to come southward and it comes during the month of January, then that will definitely be something we'll be watching, and that could give us some pretty significant cold weather that we didn't have any last year. So it's possible that we have one or two of those kind of break off, but the timing is going to be the big key there.
Did you say something about a bad ice storm, and if so, for who?
Yeah, most likely the mountains would be affected by this, but once again, everything has to set up perfectly, and usually you have to have cold air in place for a lengthy period of time, and then when it tries to warm up, you have the moisture come in before it can warm up. And so when you typically have those type of situations, places that have been prone, you know, in recent history have been Lookout Mountain, Sand Mountain, the Carolina Mountains, and the Blue Ridge, and sometimes near, let's say, the Plateau near Crossville. They have been prone to seeing these ice events that have been more significant than here in the valley. And once again, it only takes 2 or 3 degrees difference. So sometimes you can get into the mountains and you can have 30 degrees and you can have freezing rain, and you can have just plain old rain at 35 here in the valley. So the mountains are usually more susceptible.
Melissa Rachel was asking, because we have had such a dry summer, if we did get a snow event, what's the chances of flooding behind it?
Sometimes when you get a snow, that's the best type of moisture you can get because it does not run off very fast, especially in winter. It takes a long time for it to melt unless you see a tremendous snow, and probably we won't be in that category. So a big snow, 3 to 6, even 8-inch snow, would be almost perfect for our drought because it seeps into the ground slowly but surely, and it basically adds a lot of nitrogen to the ground too, which helps in our spring gardens too. But a snow is very good. If you had a big rain, that would be a little bit more troublesome, but a snow melts a lot slower and runs off a lot slower than a big rain.
Could we have a white Christmas?
It's possible. We had one several years ago, and normally around here you have one about every, let's say 18 or 20 years. The mountains about every 6, 8, maybe 10 years. And so, you know, it's going to be tough to get one this year. Right now I'm looking out 3 or 4 weeks, and I don't see anything that says, wow, it looks like a white Christmas, but you really can't fully determine that until you get about maybe 4 to 8 days away. And probably by, let's say, the week of the 18th, we'll have a pretty good indication whether we have a shot at that. But right now, if I was, you know, to be looking at things 3 to 6, weeks away, it doesn't look like there's going to be a white Christmas around here. But that's always subject to change, and we'll know a lot more about 7 days out.
How late can we expect for the colder temperatures once they do get here? How late into the new year can we expect for the colder temperatures to stick around?
Once it sets up, it'll relax, and then you'll have it again. January, and I think through about the middle of February, probably will be our coldest weather. So looks like the middle and second half of winter may be a bit colder. A lot of that will be depending on that snowpack. I keep mentioning snowpack, but that is key to how cold we can get down here. The reason why is when the cold air comes in from Canada and the Arctic and the northern plains, if it has a snowpack, it doesn't modify because it just refrigerates itself as it heads southward. If there's no snowpack, the air modifies. So the snowpack is going to be a major key to determining how cold it's going to be and basically how long it's going to stay cold as we get into late February and parts of March.
I think that's about it.
All right.
Well,
Everybody's-
thanks, Patrick. So.
Okay. Well, I hope that helped, and hope you enjoyed this winter weather forecast. And we'll see how this works out as we head into winter, or at least the 3 months that we consider winter here over the next few days. And once again, thanks for watching, and I'll have another recap tonight at 11.